We are genetically engineered copies of them. Okay, next slide. Let's take a look at how that was done. Human body contains 100 trillion cells. There's a nucleus inside each human cell except red blood cells. Each nucleus contains 46 chromosomes arranged in 23 pairs. One chromosome of every pair is from each parent. The chromosomes are filled with tightly coiled strands of DNA. Genes are segments of DNA that contain instructions to make proteins, the building blocks of life. This is where genetic engineering takes place. Now, we're going to go over it lightly, but it's very important. I want you to understand these things that I'm going to tell you now. Okay, next slide. Don't worry about the details and how they do it. This is what they do. They can open up a cell, our genetic engineers can, our geneticists can. We can open up a cell, open up the nucleus, pull out strands of DNA, and in that strand, 98% of it will be what's called junk DNA. We don't know what it does. If it has a function, we don't know what it is. 2% will be what are called, prosaically enough, the working segments. They work. They do what they're supposed to do. They make the proteins. Now, if you cut in the junk above a working segment and in the junk below and remove it and have done the same with another strand of DNA over here, you can move anything into anything else. It can be animal into plant, plant into animal, fish into fowl. It does not matter, because all living things at the most fundamental level are exactly alike. Understand that. We're all made of the same 4 base pairs, the same 20 amino acids. Everything's the same at the most basic level. It's like it's pop beads that are interchangeable. It is almost as if somebody designed it that way so they could just mix and match the parts and make anything they wanted. Isn't it? Something to think about. Okay, but the problem with it from an engineering standpoint is this. You're not cutting with a blade. These are not precise cuts. The blade would have to be a few molecules thick. You're cutting with chemicals. Chemicals. Now, the chemicals can cut pretty accurately, but mistakes are going to happen. Something's going to ooze out where it doesn't belong. Something's going to splash over it where it doesn't belong. Mistakes are going to happen. Inevitable. We know that. We make mistakes all the time. Another problem with genetic engineering is you don't know what you're going to get when you do this. You can't predict. You have to decide what you're going to do. You have to do it. You have to let it express, which is live, and see what you get, and then use that to determine what you do the next time. And of course, the great fear in genetic engineering is somebody's going to make a mistake and create the Andromeda strain that's going to kill us all. A legitimate concern. Although everybody's very careful, and I'm not too worried about it. But mistakes do happen because all of this is so incredibly microscopic. It's out of the nucleus of your cells, imagine how microscopic it is. But don't try to figure it out. I can't even figure it out. It's really complex. But they do it. Okay, understand that. Now, with that in mind, let's look at some of the proofs that I say indicate very clearly that we are, in fact, what the Sumerians say, a genetically engineered species by the Anunnaki. Next slide. Okay, here we go. The cerebral cortex is the deeply convoluted surface region of a brain that is most strongly linked to intelligence, lower right. It's the stained part out here. If you peel that off of the brain of a rat, it will cover a postage stamp. Peel it off of a monkey, it'll cover a postcard. Peel it off a chimp, it'll cover a sheet of typing paper. Peel it off of us, and it'll cover 4 sheets of typing paper. Now, you can see this is a transition. This is clearly a transformation. Now, there's some weird things about it. These guys are using all they've got. All they've got. We're using 1/2 of 1 page in a very different way than they are using what they have. 1/2 of 1 page. How do we know? We all know. We use about 10% of our brains. We know that from the studies done with idiot savants. You know that. And we know there are thousands of miles of neural network in our heads not being used. We don't know why. We don't know why. I'll tell you why. We shall make the atom who's strong but not too strong, smart but not too smart. They sealed it off genetically at the 10% mark, or wherever it is. We don't know exactly where it is. But wherever it is, they sealed us off. You don't want your slave to be anywhere near as smart as you. You, in fact, want your slave to be so decidedly inferior to you that you never have to worry about treating it like a slave. So they engineered us to be really clever to ourselves, but for them, we were smart enough to talk, take instructions, act with a little bit of ingenuity and self-reliance. They could turn things over to us and kind of let us take over and do it. They gave us just enough to be wonderful in our own eyes, but be pond scum relative to them. It's what they did. So, it's pretty clear in as much as that, and now understand with the idiot savants, for those of you that don't know the proof about this, idiot savants get some beam of light in the damage to the good 10. They get some beam of light and it will strike somewhere in the other 90%. You all saw Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, remember? Well, they get it in math, they get it in music, they get it in sculpture, art, whatever, wherever it strikes. Now, if there's just one, we could say, well, that's a freak of nature. But we've had lots of them, lots of them. So we know that all of this is out there. It's in our heads. We just can't access it. We just can't use it. But if it wasn't in our heads, it wouldn't be in their heads. So we know that it happened. They have no idea how. Well, I say that the Anunnaki did it deliberately, and that makes sense to me. Next slide. Okay, mitochondrial DNA, late 1980s, you might remember this. In humans, over 99.99% of a cell's DNA is packed into the cell nucleus, with a small amount occurring outside the nucleus in small structures called mitochondria. That's these babies right here. They're about 16,000 base pairs long. Now, when you have a mixing and a mating, the DNA in the nucleus mixes. But with the mitochondrial DNA, it does not. Sperm doesn't have mitochondrial, eggs do. And so females pass it down intact generation after generation. Well, when this was figured out in the 70s, boy, the botanists and the geneticists said, great, now we can go and find out if the split from the common ancestor was closer to 8 million years or closer to 5 million years. Remember that? We're going to now pin it down. It's going to be one or the other. We're going to figure it out. So they went out and they took the mitochondrial DNA of women all around the world, every race, every creed, every culture, every country, and they brought them back to the lab and they started working on them. And when the answers came in the late 1980s, it was not 8 million years ago. It wasn't 5 million years ago. It was way the heck down to 200 to 250,000 years ago, and that's all. We don't exist genetically beyond 200 to 250,000 years. And of course, needless to say, the anthropologists said, you guys are nuts. We've got these skulls showing, these bodies showing, these prehumans showing that we go back millions of years. What's the matter with you? And the geneticists said, we couldn't have been wrong that many times. Impossible. We'll do it again. And they have. They've done it. It always comes out the same. Outside 250,000 years ago. That's it. We're brand spanking new. Brand new on this planet. Now, there's still a lot of people, there's still a lot of people that will not accept that. A lot of people that will not accept that. But it is true, and it is becoming more and more acceptable, for as outrageous as it is. Now, not only do we know when we were created, we know where. Where? Because the oldest of us consistently kept coming in Southern Africa. Next slide. And in fact, the cover of Newsweek in 1987 showed that if in fact there was an Adam and Eve, they were black. They would have to have been black. But of course they knew the flack they were going to catch, in the South at least, so they made the blacks look as white as they could. This guy looks almost as white as OJ, doesn't he? But the point is, in trying to have it both ways, they caught it coming and going, because you can imagine the letters to the editor after this issue. But the point is, it tells the truth. The oldest of us do come from Southern Africa, and we definitely are 200 to 250,000 years old. And guess what else? That is just what the Sumerians say about us. That the Anunnaki created us around 200 to 250,000 years ago in Southern Africa to dig their gold. What a coincidence. What a coincidence. Okay, next slide. Okay, what happens when a creature is born in the wild severely screwed up physically? What happens to it? Dies, right? Parents will kill it. They will not put that defect into the gene pool. You're looking at the great exception. You're looking at 28 of our most severe genetic defects, but we have 4,000 and counting. 4,000 and counting. Now, we're only 200, 250,000 years old. We shouldn't have one. We've got 4,000 and counting. How did it happen? Cutting and splicing process mistakes. Cutting and splicing, oops, made a mistake. Cutting, splicing, oops, made a mistake. They don't care. They're making a slave. They're not going to fix the mistakes. What do they care if it's 1 in 100 dies from the problems? If it's 1 in 10, they don't care they're making a mistake. I mean, they're making a slave. But they know the numbers like we have found out the hard way. If you let the population propagate naturally, those numbers go way down for each person. Right now, as we sit here, we average about 50 of the 4,000 each of us. And we have a mating with our mate. If we share any of those 50, then each of our offspring will have a 1 in 4 chance of expressing it. That's why you'll get mongoloids in the best of families, mongoloids in the lowest of families, and all around the world. And that's what genetic defects are. In the wild, you will get 2-headed calves and 6-legged goats. That's a sperm-egg misconnect. That's not something that you see steadily on and on. A little gem like spina bifida, which is not going to let you live to adulthood, nor is it going to let you reproduce if you do. What's that doing in a gene pool? It was all put there, folks. Put there. No question. Next slide. Okay. Here we go with the chromosome match. It's kind of hard to see, comparison rather. Humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans right here. And you see how similar they are. And as we know that between humans and chimpanzees, there's 99% similarity in the DNA and 98% with gorillas. And it's like, oh, well, then that we're just kissing cousins. That's as close as you can be. We're almost the same thing. Well, not really. Because we're talking about a 3 billion base pair genome. 1%, that's 30 million base pairs. That's a couple thousand strands of DNA. If you know what you're doing, that's a lot of change. But also understand that all higher animals, and never say this, share 50% and up. Squirrel, 50% and up. You see, so it isn't quite as astounding as it seems. But what we're looking at here is the Anunnaki have got themselves a real problem. And that problem is this. They come to Earth and they decide they're going to make the slave. They decide we're going to use this creature of Earth, let's say it was an Alma. They test the blood, and what do they find? First thing, big problem, 48 chromosomes. All primates have 48 chromosomes. But they, the Anunnaki, have only 46 chromosomes. How do we know that? Because we have 46 chromosomes. We descend from primates, and yet somehow we lose 2 whole chromosomes. That's an awful lot of DNA. And somehow we're so much better than them. Well, they have 68 or something like that relative to them. But we don't. We have 46. So we know this was the result of the genetic engineering, and they had a problem, the Anunnaki did. What could they do? They had to, how it works. There's 24 in sperm and egg, 23 sperm and egg. So you got to get the sperm and the egg to match up, one or the other, 23 or 24. Can you take out a chromosome from the creature of Earth, the 24, and still have a creature of Earth? No. Can you add a chromosome to yourself and still have an Anunnaki? Go up to 24 from 23? No. You got a real problem. It's an insoluble problem. And you need that because you got to get the first hybrid to get in the game of the genetic engineering. You got to get something alive that is a blending of you two to begin to work on it. So what can you do? How can you solve that problem? There's only one way, and boy is it smart. You go in and you look and you compare the chromosomes and you find 2 that can be fused and will take up 1 space but maintain the integrity of all the chromosomal material. You find a spot where you can fuse 2 to make 1, and now you've got all the material but taken up 1 place, and now you're ready to rock and roll. You with me? All right, let's look at the number 2 chromosome close up. They just went to the second one. They just looked down the row and they said, okay, this will work. Orangutan, 2 and 3. Gorilla, 2 and 3. Chimp, 2 and 3. Human. Uh-oh. Fusion. How long do you think it would take Mother Nature to do this? There's no clearer proof that we're genetically engineered just like they say we are. Next slide. And so, I think it's fair to say that everything we know is wrong, at least about human origins, that we were given life by the gods with a small g through the equivalent of a test tube, and that we were the hair-covered hominoids, and that our humanity emerged from that. Now, this is where I normally end it, and they tell me I'm running out of time, so I want to get to the new thing that I want to share with you. Oh, no, where did I? Oh, here it is. Because this is really exciting to me. On the 12th of this month, which was just recently, I received an email from a person who wants to remain anonymous. And this is what he said to me. He is a geneticist, a full-blown geneticist. And he says, "Dear Mr. Pye, I agree with your conclusions and will give you a few hints, if you wish, as a DNA deep throat. First, look up the huge discontinuities between man and the various apes for whole mitochondrial DNA, genes for the Rh factor, and human Y chromosomes, among others. Regarding number 3, the chromosomes, I refer you to K.D. Smith's 1987 study titled Repeated DNA Sequences of the Human Y Chromosome. It says most human Y chromosome sequences so far examined do not have homologs, which are similar sequences, on the Y chromosomes of other primates. Human female DNA does look somewhat ape-like, but not the male Y. This means that if we are a crossbred hybrid species, as you contend, meaning me, the cross had to be between a female ape-like creature, a creature of the earth, as the Sumerians said, and a male person from elsewhere, as I also contend." He goes on to say, "What the evolutionists do is find certain genes which look very similar between man and ape, then they make a tree of descent while ignoring those huge impassable abysses of difference elsewhere. Also, by certain methods of DNA dating, one can tell that numerous genes have been recently added to the human genome. If workers in my field were to say such things openly, we would be ostracized, as I also contend, and forced to live in a tent. Any work along these lines would be rejected without any form of appeal. So what can we do? Sincerely, DNA Deep Throat." Now, what this means, thank you, what this means is we win. We win. Because where one of these came from, more of these are going to come. As my profile rises higher, and I think, frankly, that I'm the only person out here pushing this genetic stuff that you're seeing like this, more of these are going to come my way. We're going to win. You've seen the evidence. Now, right now, we're getting our brains kicked out. We are getting our brains kicked out. That's why we're called the fringe. And the reason is we keep mounting these frontal attacks on the establishments. And every film that we produce, every photograph, every sighting, every testimony, every capture, every encounter that we have, and we throw at them with the best intentions. Our word is truth, is it not? Our word is, it's true. It's true. And their word is what? Liar. Liar. They dress it up. They say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're seeing. You made a mistake. It was swamp gas, whatever. They're basically standing there and saying, you're just a bunch of liars. We're right and you're wrong. And because it is our word against their word, our word truth, their word liar, their word wins. Day in, day out, year after year. It's very frustrating, is it not? Boy, it just annoys the heck out of me. But what this means is we're going to win in the end. Why? Because the genes say so. The genes back us up. And right now, this is not a field that you're very familiar with. And I've worked very hard to make this very simplistic so you could understand at least the fundamentals, and it's the same in my book. You need to be aware of this is because this is the back door, kids. This is the back. We're not going to storm them from the front. We've been doing it for years. They know how to deal with us. Our word against them, we're going to lose. But in this instance, the genetic end of it, what is it? It's their word against them. It's their research against them. They're going to lose. We're going to beat them with the genetic evidence. We got to beat them. We will beat them. We know we're right. We know they're wrong. They know they're wrong. They know they're wrong. We just have to get mentally tough and accept that this is a war. This is a fight. This is not, gentlemen, Marquis de Queensberry rules. This is a dog fight. This is a knife fight. And you all have got to get out there and proselytize. You have to familiarize yourself with these basics at least. And instead of throwing things at them that are going to bounce off like BBs off a barn door, you got to start throwing some darts. This stuff will do it. This will do it. We can win. We're going to win. Thank you.